Welcome to Go Open, the world's only program dedicated entirely to open source. What's open source? It's what happens when people from Cape Town, hippies, get hold of software. Stop hogging, share, kumbaya. I'm just kidding, but it's kind of like that. I will explain it as we go. Very exciting, and it's not just about PCs and laptops and hubs and bits and bytes and hubs and terminals and portals and gateways and all that. There's more to it, because it's a modern world, even though our children will look at it one day and go, interstellar travel. What were you thinking, you weirdos? What do you call that, the fur tracker thing? And then later on we have a competition where we ask you questions, you give us answers, and we give you prizes. It's fantastic, and there's lots of them.
Open source software exists as a result of the combined efforts of millions of computer programmers, users, and software vendors from around the world. They share their intellectual property freely, and they believe that software should cost nothing and should enrich the lives of users. Open source software is the alternative and biggest challenger to closed source or proprietary software. It generally costs the user nothing. It can be distributed freely to anyone. Download it, use it, modify it, and give it away. It's a whole new world. Open source is the future of computing.
And now for our main story. That's correct, a homegrown success. We have an exclusive interview with Mark Shuttleworth, South Africa's favorite internet billionaire. And we talked to him about how open source was key to his success.
Cape Town is known as the Mother City, and it's here where South Africa's first internet billionaire Mark Shuttleworth made headlines when he sold his company Thought Consulting for a record 3.5 billion rand. Most people are familiar with that story, but did you know that open source played a large role in his success?
The US had a bunch of laws which tried to regulate how cryptography could be used by American companies doing business internationally. And I thought that would present an opportunity to do an end run around that and provide cryptographic services and software to people globally, where Netscape and Microsoft and IBM couldn't compete because of really silly laws in America. And because I'd become familiar with open source software, I knew that the tools, the web server tools are available, and I knew that the cryptography tools are available. It was just a matter of putting those two together. It was a way of starting to meet the engineers who did the cryptographic work for Netscape and for Microsoft. And that then provided an entry into the certificate business, which is another aspect of the same industry.
What exactly is a digital certificate?
A digital certificate is a way of making sure that you know who you're actually talking with when you encrypt communications. Basically what you do is you both agree to trust some third party, and that third party issues a passport to you and I, and then we can communicate using those passports. And the third party is not involved in the communication. So when we set up Thought, we weren't actually brokering all of the transactions that happen online. We were simply saying, this is Amazon.com. And then you could connect securely to Amazon.com and know that you could give them your credit card details and so on.
So a large part of the business is the reputation that the issuing authority has.
Many businesses in the States never even really thought to step up and try to get into that industry because they thought it would be dominated by the Ernst & Youngs and the IBMs, people with a strong established technology or trust relationships and reputations. But the reality was the business was so small and the potential risks so high, none of those guys wanted to do it. And so there really was a sort of counterintuitive opportunity for a little guy to climb in.
Initially operating from his parents' garage, Mark grew his company first into a converted house and then into custom-built offices. It was a time when the internet was expanding and e-commerce was taking off. One of their main competitors, VeriSign, was a key player in the corporate end of the market.
What started to happen was that first the internet was starting to take off outside of the US, and so there was more growth outside of the US, and also it was starting to become clear that small businesses were a bigger market than large businesses for these digital certificates. And so they figured it would be easier to acquire a player that already had a stake in those sectors than to try and change their business model accordingly.
After lengthy negotiations, Mark accepted an offer totaling $575 million or 3.5 billion rands. A few months later, the internet bubble burst and stock markets swayed as tech companies started losing profits.
But an interesting observation on the whole bubble bursting. If you look at the number of certificates sold, which is really directly correlated to the number of businesses running on the internet, that number has continued to grow. So even though Wall Street and the NASDAQ got flattened because people realized that the internet is, just like any other business environment. Having said that, it's still an incredibly vibrant and dynamic place to do business, and there are more and more businesses starting up, more and more devices connected, more and more people connected. So while the bubbles burst, the revolution has continued.
So, with a fortune at his disposal, what was his next frontier? Space. Like many young boys, Mark had always dreamed of flying to space. When American millionaire Dennis Tito bought a seat in the Soyuz for $20 million, Mark decided to follow suit. But he didn't want to be a mere passenger. When he finally took off on the 25th of April 2002, he took along with him projects on stem cell research, HIV, and human physiology.
This is where the stem cell and embryology experiment is currently housed.
Space, the final frontier. Or is it cyberspace? Mark is pioneering new opportunities in the world of open source in South Africa and beyond. He recently launched Ubuntu Linux, a full operating system and software package on one CD that is available free of charge.
I've made a commitment that the software will always remain absolutely free. So it's an interesting experiment. On the one hand, I'm putting resources back into the open source community, and I feel good about that. If Ubuntu doesn't become sustainable, at least I feel like I've helped accelerate and inject money back into a community that really empowered me to build thought. But if we can build services around that software that pay the salaries of the people who produce the software, then that will make me feel even better, because I can go on to other projects, and that I know will then continue to grow and continue to thrive.
A lot of people think that Shuttleworth's hot because he has a lot of bread. Well, he does. He has bread and dough on top of the bread, and then some more bread and dough on the dough. But next up, you're going to meet a machine called the Freedom Toaster, and it cooks. Mark Chase, our intrepid reporter, went to Cape Town to find out about a very different kind of toaster. It's called the Freedom Toaster, and it's best served with lashings and lashings and lashings of open source.
So you want to get Linux. Here's the problem. It's 700 megabytes, and with the dial-up modem in South Africa, it could take you one heck of a long time to get this sorted out. Here's the solution. The Freedom Toaster. What's the Freedom Toaster? Well, let's ask Jason from the Shuttleworth Foundation.
We all say that open source and Linux is free, but connectivity in this country adds a price tag. So what we've come up with is the Freedom Toaster, and it's basically just a computer, regular everyday computer with 3 CD-ROM drives in it that write your CDs for you. And they do that simultaneously. All you have to do is just choose what you want, and it'll do it for you while you wait.
Now you're going to show me exactly how easy you say it is to get my favorite distro off the system.
There's a No More button over there. Now, if you just want to know more about Linux and you don't want to burn CDs, you can go through that process. However, if you want to just burn your CDs and you want to get out of here, you can click Choose Distribution.
Many Linux distros take up 3 CDs or more, which is why the Freedom Toaster has 3 independent CD burners, a world first in programming terms. It took just 7 minutes to burn the entire Mandrake distro.
Simple as that.
Yeah, that's it.
What are the plans for the future for the Freedom Toaster?
Well, we're busy redesigning it, so that's happening currently. And then we're going to look at rolling this out nationally. And we're going to have a website that's going to tell everyone about where the toasters are and so on. And that's www.freedomtoaster.org.
When you're surfing the internet, your web browser requests pages from the site that you're connected to. The Apache web server is a piece of software that serves up about 70% of those pages worldwide. Now, in order to understand this entire list of things, we sent Mark Chase, because he's quite good like that, to talk to one of the founders of the Apache Foundation, and his name is Dirk Willem van Gulik, and this is what he had to say.
There were people, myself included, who basically were given a task by their bosses, by their institutions, to basically maintain a web server. In my case, basically my boss wanted me to make satellite pictures available, weather pictures available to scientists. And for quite a while that actually worked really rather well, except that at one point Rob McCool, who was one of the main developers at NCSA in America, left to form Netscape. And all of a sudden there was this web server piece of software which we all depended on for our jobs, suddenly was left out there orphaned. So what started to happen was that we started to collaborate together to maintain that piece of software, to make it better, to basically make it meet our daily demands. That basically became the Apache web server at one point.
How popular is the Apache server?
The World Wide Web sort of originated from CERN in Switzerland. And with it came a very small server, which was only really suitable to be run on mainframes at that time. Since then, basically, we've sort of grown from being just a few percent to well over 70% of the web servers in the world. Specifically, if you go to the very large super sites like Yahoo, like Amazon, those are typically the sites which run the Apache web server. So if you actually look on the wire, if you look at the number of pages being served by Apache or the amount of bandwidth Apache basically uses worldwide, the numbers are even higher than that 70%.
A lot of people who believe in open source say it's empowering not only to developers but to users as well in the end, because it's about freedom versus being dominated by proprietary software and those proprietary software developers. What is your whole feel with regards to open source and the future in that?
I have to disappoint you there, or basically disappoint people who are looking in the Apache Software Foundation, sort of for people on a mission who really want to evangelize open source in the world. Most people in the Apache Foundation are actually not quite like that. They're sort of they typically have real jobs, real customers, who just have demands. And they found that the cheapest way, or the highest quality way, or some other compromise way of actually serving their customers is by using open source software and collaborating by others. So most people are simply there because it makes sense to build software together.
What threats do you foresee the internet will face in the future?
Right now, you can use the same web browser, the same web server, anywhere on the internet. Whether you're in China, in America, in South Africa, it doesn't matter. Everything can talk to everything.